it's normal. No, bro, you're giving yourself an excuse. You're weak if that's what you're telling yourself, and I'm telling you here straight, because it's going to cause so much problems in your future and in your current life right now. I'm gonna be authentic with you guys. This video I've tried to make about 3 to 4 times, and I keep getting disconnected from what I'm speaking, and I think the key thing is that I'm not being authentic. So right now I'm at a cemetery outside my dad's gravestone. I wanted to make this video to truly express my authentic self, to have a reference point not only for me but for others around me, to know where I've come from and where I'm going, because I am right now so driven to be the best man I could be. And I've never really truly expressed much of my authentic self, especially my emotions. And you don't have to share emotions to be authentic. All authentic is just showing how you're truly feeling, what's going through your mind in the moment. I've kind of lacked in that because of my fear of what people are going to think of me. Over these last few stages of my life, and like last few weeks, I've changed drastically my mindset, who I am, my habits. And because a lot of you guys see me as this confident speaker on these videos, or a strong powerlifter, and that wasn't always me. Although I've built up that mental drive and persistence as of now, I think a big true part of that is the struggle and adversity I've gone through and the environment that's shaped me. We're gonna rewind. I was extremely competitive in primary school, and during lunchtime and lunch breaks, when we'd play sports, I'd always try and find what team's the losing team, because I didn't want to be on the winning team and start with the edge. I always wanted the challenge, that challenge of being slightly behind, so then I could push through. That's what back then, because I wanted to prove to those close to me, my siblings, my dad, my mom, all those around me, that I am something. And I think part of that was also how emotionally distraught I was even back then, as I didn't really connect with a lot of people. And I know the emotions are a key part with how you connect to people, because the only really big emotion or emotional part of me was anger, because I used to have major anger issues growing up. And a big reason why, the only really emotion I really saw in my environment was things such as anger. And when I used to get fat hiding as a little kid, I still remember a couple of those from my dad vividly. That period, only 8 years old, when I found out that my dad had cancer, it was a confusing time, because I didn't really understand what was going on. But when he was sick, there was a lot of vivid traumatic things that happened, as well as in the part, like prior to that, those hidings that I used to get, and how I used to just see a lot of anger and arguments. I didn't really see any other emotion, and that's why I used to have those anger issues. But I only really lose my temper when I'm at home. And I lost my temper with my dad one time, and I would say just outrageous things to him that I didn't really mean, because that emotion kind of fades your rational brain or your logical brain. I demanded to him, and I shouted to him that I wish he would hurry up and die. And I vividly remember his face just dropping after I said that, and it eats me up mentally to this day. And I regret that heavily, because I never, even back then when I lost my temper, and even when I was in high school and stuff, I lost my temper at home. I would often never apologize. So, as well as because he was on all sorts of medication, and how painful it was for him. And not only was it painful, he knew what he was getting into, because he was a doctor himself. He knew how rough this period was, not only physically, but mentally, and then financially, because of the medication he was on. That really struck me was when we were at church and he was in the wheelchair. He just started bawling his eyes out. I really felt it the most difficult, because I'd never really seen him share that emotion. As growing up, I only really saw him as a strong father figure, but also his anger. And he admits that. There's a video I'm going to share at the end of this that I'm fortunate to have, that we made before he died, and he explained how and acknowledged how I have a good temper, and so did he, but I needed to control it. And I remember when I saw him cry, it was completely new to me, and I didn't know how to feel about it. And he was doing it loudly, he was weeping. I was almost a bit ashamed because it was bringing so much attention, and I didn't like that attention. And that's one of the reasons why I don't really get so emotional, and I just keep to myself. Even when I'm here right now, I remember at the burial and at the funeral, I tried so hard not to cry, and I didn't. My eyes got watery, but I didn't cry. And the reason being was because I didn't like expressing that emotion. I thought that you're weak if you could do that. Now, I'm not here to say that only strong men cry and show emotion. I'm not here to say that. I'm here to say that a strong man is authentic. And authentic doesn't mean crying. Authentic means just expressing and speaking what's on your mind. And that's why I'm making this video. I actually remember seeing one of my brothers crying, and in my mind, I didn't tell it to him, but I saw him crying. I thought, he's weak. He's weak. So I had that mentality of, and almost insecurity of not being able to share your authentic emotions. And I think that's why I didn't really have many strong, deep connections with other people, and even like my family members, is because I know now with connection and relationships, you have to express vulnerability, and that's how you build trust. And I never did that. I kept that all to myself, and it built up. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I had that big drive and motivation to be as strong as I can and be the best. But I also think it's in combination of wanting to feel important and growing up. I remember at the funeral, family friends asked me, well, why are you so happy? Why are you so like smiley? Because I used to crack jokes. I used to be that smiley kid, even when I was sad. And it'd be a facade, it'd be to cover it. And the reality was I was too scared to show my true emotions of what I thought. And I don't want to put this facade that when my dad had anger issues that he was this bad man, because he wasn't. He was a genuine, loving person, and I hear that and see that today, even today. Like this week that's just been, I've had 3 people come up to me and speak to me about how my dad, this is 11 years since he died, how they impacted and made an impact, and how they remembered him specifically, because he was a doctor and he really studied a lot in theology, his faith and philosophy, and in his medical expertise, because we had thousands of books, but he also, I know he studied how to connect with people and how to be a better leader, and there's books that we have at home. He even had books on how to read books quicker. That was like the type of person he was in terms of seeking the truth and knowledge. That's what he wrote in one of his journals, to seek truth. And he prayed for wisdom greater than Solomon, and he wanted others to also find the truth, but he acknowledged that some don't have that drive that he has, and how he wants to make up for that to help them. And he wrote how he would rewrite essays and read it again and rewrite so he could make a difference. And clearly it did, because those people still remember his guidance. One of them mentioned how at one of the doctor's appointments for her son, how my dad just swept up all his problems, and how he even gave them our home phone number to ring if there was any issues. And I asked her why she remembered this, because it had been 11 years since he died. And he said, because you remember often how people make you feel, especially if it's a warm connection. And I remember me and my brother used to hop in the van with him, and he'd be saying, I'd ask where he's going, and he'd be saying, I'm going to my best friend's house. And it would turn out to be a church. It'd be a church, and he would go pray, and he'd teach all the little symbolism behind the things that are in the church, such as the P and the X stands for Christ. To teach like acronyms of how the Bible stands for the best instructions before leaving earth, and how to find true joy you have to put Jesus first, others second, and then yourself. And so I reflect back, and now that he's gone, that how much of a missed opportunity I have, because I've read his journals that he wrote down. He'd journal his struggles as well, and that's what I do here. I've got my journal here, and I have been journaling, and I want to change people's lives. My dad always wanted to help others, and that's what he wrote. And I've had struggles along the way, because when he died, there was 7 of us kids that my mum raised on her own, with the youngest being 4 years old, and I was only 9 years old when he died. Was fortunate to get a scholarship to St. Paul's, which is quite a posh school. I didn't fit in because obviously I didn't grow up rich. And I know that's a cliche saying, but especially during that period, because my mum was going to wins. She would tell me how she hated going there, how that money that she got was never enough. And I knew she struggled with bills and stuff like that. And that's a big driver for me today. I used to get pushed around in that early stages, year 9, and bullied as such. Now, I only remember 2 times visibly when I got physically bullied. I can remember getting kicked after lunch, and I was eating an apple, and the bro slapped the apple out of my hand that I was eating and pushed me around. And that, because at home I would get angry and I'd share that emotion, but then I was actually so shy and insecure, and I didn't want to share that authentic self of what was going in my mind, and I often would just mask it with just smiling or just like a little chuckle. But deep inside, I was frustrated, I was sad, I was angry, I was mixed, I was burning up. And I used to get teased a lot in year 9. There was a saying that kids would say, and that carried throughout high school, and they'd say like, oh, seagull eyebrows, big nose friends, because my eyebrows, they would make fun that they would look like a seagull wings, and then they would say, oh, big nose friends, and they'll say friends, and this implying that I had no friend. And the reality is, I never hung out with people from school. I was doing everything alone. I was so independent. I remember one time after I'd been like just teased and made fun of the whole day in year 9, and I walked home and I was on the verge of tears. I would chuck my headphones in and I would walk home with my head down. That's where that fire built up inside, that especially combined with me wanting to be good at something. I was sick of that and I wanted to make a change. I wanted to start building my physique and my strength. So I started working at home. I didn't have any equipment to train, and I made did with what I had. I did push-ups. I would put 2 chairs together and do dips. I would do pull-ups on a tree. That's how I started, with whatever I had, because I was so driven, combined with that emotional, weak boy that was insecure and pushed around, bullied and teased and made fun of, and never really had good connections. That's where it started. And I made good progress, but I didn't have access to a lot of food at home. I'm not saying we were starving or anything, but it wasn't really a lot to be bulking, and I didn't have access to protein powder. I made did with what I had. I would put some raw eggs into like a smoothie. I would use Nutrigrain. It was actually the off-brand Nutrigrain because the normal one was too expensive, and I'd put that in, go to school, and I made the most of every resource at the school lunches. Because I was so driven, I made sure to connect with the chefs, and I knew them on a first name basis. Get burgers, I'd wrap them up in paper towels and I'd put them in my pockets. I'd eat them in period 6 and I'd eat them for dinner because I was so focused on bulking. And I would go there and I'd see kids just either not eating their food or making comments at how like this food sucks. And then, bro, it was a hot meal. This food was good. I remember one time I took fruit out because I normally would, and I'd take it home and eat it later. I took like 2 apples, like 3 bananas. I put it all in my pockets, and I was about to walk out, and a teacher stopped me and told me to empty my pockets, and I've got a full-on fruit salad in my pockets. And a lot of those kids didn't even eat half the food that was on the plate. Like, you would scrape your plate off at the end. I would always eat everything on my plate at that school. And that's why you see a lot of times in my YouTube videos, I'm licking that plate clean. And I saw good progress as well. Now, that carried me through into like year 10 as well, and I started to build. But during that stage in year 10 was another big event that took place that really shook me up. I was at a camp. I've got all my bags, so I'm ringing my mum, and she's not packing up, and I don't know what to do. So I decided I would walk home, and I walked home with all my bags. Turns out that my mum was on the verge of dying, and that she had collapsed and that she had to be taken by the ambulance because she had an autoimmune disease, like type 1 or 2 diabetes, I'm not sure, and it got to the point where she needed medication, but because she didn't even know she had this autoimmune disease, had built up, and she was on the verge of dying, and she was in hospital. And that was a big wake up for me, and realizing how short life is and all these opportunities that are in front of you, especially the relationships. As even then, I'd never really even had a good relationship with my mum. I would still lose my temper, get really angry in that year 9 and 10 period of my life, because I didn't have no father figure back then. I didn't know how I should be acting, and especially going from being harshly disciplined to then not disciplined at all. That was a struggle during that period. And my mum came back. Now she works as a nurse. She's working really hard, but I know she's finding it difficult in her situation right now, financially, mentally, and it troubles me a lot. During that year 10 period, I actually transitioned from training at home to then in the school gym, doing squats, bench press, deadlifts. I was unsure about how to do it, but I was determined. I was determined to get bigger and stronger, as often I would actually think in my head of all the times that people would tease me, like push me around, and I used it as fire. And I used to actually listen to motivational YouTube videos while I was gymming. When I started making moves forward with that, there was another struggle that I fell into, and I know a lot of you guys struggle with this right now, because I've been in your shoes. If you are a young male, or you may even be an older male and you still struggle with this, and what I'm talking about is a very shameful, and I'm going to call it a sin because it is a sin, of lust, specifically porn and masturbation. I know a lot of you guys struggle with it, and it's a shameful thing, but because of actually where I am right now, I've overcome it, and I've always had thoughts of being able to express my struggles to help you guys that are going through it right now, because I know how tough it is. And that's what started to brew up in that year 10 period. Even earlier, I fell into it. I got exposed to it at a very young age. Even I fell into it deep, and it became an addiction. And what an addiction is when it has more control over you than you have over it. Now, some of you guys may still be falling into lust, and you won't have the balls to admit that it is an addiction. A lot of people push the idea that masturbation and watching this is healthy and it's good, it's normal. No, bro. You're giving yourself an excuse. You're weak if that's what you're telling yourself. And I'm telling you here straight, because it's going to cause so much problems in your future and in your current life right now. That's not what it's meant for. The act of being able to reproduce, procreate, is a gift. And you're out here wasting it for your own sexual pleasure. It's controlling you. That's a weak mindset that you have if you're falling into that lust. And I know how hard it is, because I used to relapse again and again, and I would tell myself that it would be the last time that I would stop. It was that urge, it grew up, and I used to see even just women walking around, I'd see them so sexually, instead of just seeing them as who they are and their person. And it sounds cliche, especially if you're someone that's struggling with it, that saying of seeing women sexually rather than as a person, but it's cliche for a reason. And when I was going through those years, it took so much of my energy. I was demotivated. I'd fall into the lust trap, and I would spend hours searching online on pornographic websites. And it was me trying to find something, some sort of purpose or fulfillment, but you never will find it. You'll always, once you get that instant hit of dopamine, after you've fallen into porn and masturbation, you realize that this has not fulfilled you, and this is not what you're supposed to do, not your purpose. And it's very shameful. That's what it does. It takes away from your motivation and that instant dopamine, but also the shame that I got through, and not having a father figure to talk about these things, and it not being really spoken about, but rather kept to yourself. And instead of that, carried into like year 11, year 12, year 13, and even outside of high school to an extent. It was only really until the end of high school where I started actually to make a change, a vivid change. I wanted to change years back, but I couldn't, because I was so held on to this addiction. And as I was battling with that, my training took off. I said to myself, all right, I'm gonna make this one thing that I'm doing, strength training, getting stronger. I saw the results. I'm gonna make something out of it. And I focused, and a lot of people say they train hard, and there's probably people that do, but no doubt, I know that I train hard. every single session. Like back when I was in year 12, when I started training at the uni rec, I would fail reps that would look like a max, and I would be frustrated with myself. So I would lock in, I would get a drink of water, put my headphones in. I used to watch Larry Wheels videos to hype myself up so I could get that weight up. And I would even think to really dark emotional times, especially when my dad was dying, and that video that I'm going to show you at the end of him speaking to me, I would think and listen back to those times to really spark some sort of emotional drive, because I wanted to be something. I wanted to have some sort of purpose, and I entered my first competition in 2021. I won that, I got gold. And then when, that was actually when COVID hit, which was another battle in my mind, because I finally found something I was good at. And not being able to do that during that COVID period messed with me mentally a lot. Especially that fear, because I felt like I was going to be so good at this, that there was others, my competition was able to train, and I was left stuck at home and couldn't do anything. I was so driven, couldn't let that happen, and I used to just do whatever I could. Push-ups with my sister on my back. I used to do pull-ups with a suitcase tied around my waist. Whatever I could to be able to start making progress. I entered my next competition, 2022. I won that. That was North Islands. And then our internationals, I won that, got gold. And then I got invited, was selected to compete at Commonwealth Champs 2022, and I won that gold. And that was my most memorable movement, that 290 kilo deadlift, which was a world record at that time. It was probably the most surreal feeling, holding that weight, being in that auditorium and locking it out after all that hard work I'd put in. I didn't just push through that competition. We kept training into 2023, and that's when I first moved out of Hamilton, where I was living, and took a gap year. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, my direction. I was lost, and I was not only lost, I was still falling into lust. And it was a big battle, because I wanted to stop. I wanted to just beat it and not give in to all these sexual temptations that's given to you. Over that period, it started to space out. I was able to actually build discipline to control myself to an extent, but I was still relapsing. And I know a lot of you guys are going to continue to relapse, and that's the part of habitual sin. And it's called habitual sin because it's become more of a habit. And that was a real tough period, because I was injured as well, building up to Junior World Champs that year. Not being able to train and do something and work towards the one thing that I was good at really ate me up inside. Those mental battles. And even then, I would never share about these emotional struggles that I'd have. I'd keep it to myself. That same year, when I was building up, my car got stolen, and I was having to bus to the gym, and it would take like just under an hour. It was like a 40-minute bus and then a 20-minute walk. And because I started a GoFundMe page to be able to compete overseas, because you don't get any funding from powerlifting in New Zealand, it's all self-funded. I created that GoFundMe page, and I felt pressure that because I wouldn't be able to compete and lift to my full potential, that people are paying for me to go, and I'm going to be letting them down. And I kept it all to myself, but it worked out in the end, because I stuck through to it. And I want you guys to know that when you're going through these challenging times, that it will work out if you stick to it and you go all the way. And at that competition, we ended up getting gold, and it was probably the most surreal moment, being on that podium, and could be able to tell my dad that I have created or achieved all these things, but obviously you can't. That's why one of the reasons I'm making this video, so I can speak it off my head and out there. That's why I want to let you guys know that you're not alone through your struggles. You can get through it. And that shame that you feel is because you feel like you're the only one, and that not everyone else is going through their struggles. But just like I kept everything to myself, others too are keeping them to themselves. Their struggles, their shameful sins that they do, that they don't want people to know about. And if you can overcome it, you're going to unleash so much confidence. And that's who I'm becoming right now. Is because after facing that Junior World Champs comp, spoke to a few people at the competition about how they make a living through their personal brand. And I thought, you know what, I can do the same. So I decided to leave my sales job that year, come back home, and I was gonna go all into my coaching personal brand, make something out of this. Now, I was throwing something behind, such as the sales job, because I was good at that sales job. I remember the first week, I actually got the most sales in that team, even though it was my first week, because I studied before I even got into the job. And I probably could have continued with that sales job, but I was passionate about this lifting, and I needed some sort of income, so I worked at Domino's. I'm still there today, but we're not going to be there for long, because I'm creating this personal brand and coaching business, and I can see it. And sometimes you guys struggle to see goals and ambitions that people tell you. And it was hard for me at first. Hard for me to believe that I'd be able to have a home gym. But that brings me to where I am right now. I competed last year, Junior World Champs, I got 4th. That was actually my first competition to never be on the podium. All the other competitions I've been on the podium because I've just been so driven to work, and I know some of you guys are out there that are driven to work, and you need that destination, that direction. And I felt lost along the way because I had even had doubts in quitting powerlifting. I've had doubts twice, but because I've built up such a level, that fear of throwing away something I've built up. But over these last little time period, I've kind of reflected on my life, and end of last year, I made a big change in my life to actually turn towards my faith much more strongly. So I'd grown up Christian, specifically Catholic, my whole life, but I never really took it seriously. After I went through that lost period in direction where I would doom scroll hours on my phone. I know some of you guys right now are still doing that. You need to cut that ish out, bro. You complain and you tell yourself you're all down and you're all sad. You have self-pity and you feel bad for yourself, and you wish people would feel bad for you too. But the reality is you put that on yourself. You're still scrolling on your phone, getting nothing done towards your goals. You're still lounging around. You're still falling into lust and watching porn and masturbating, bro. What are you doing with your life? Question yourself, because that's what I did. I questioned myself. I asked myself, what are my values? I even dived so deep about questioning what's my meaning of life. And that was a big changing point for me, was questioning what is the meaning of life. And if there is no God, then there is no meaning in life, in the sense that if there's no transcendent being that created this earth and created us, then what's behind it? Just some chance? And some people will say that, oh, you can create subjective meaning, your own meaning, but all that is a psychological trick. It's not grounded in anything. And oftentimes you will change your meaning as you get older. So you have no foundation or objective purpose that you can fall back on and know and have confidence in. I questioned myself why I identify as a Christian, at least to myself, because someone asked me that, and I told them a superficial answer that if I was atheist, I would not be convinced. And so I decided to dive deep into my faith, and I started to grow and learn the philosophical arguments for and against there being a God. And as of now, I stand that I firmly believe there is a God, and I believe specifically in his son Jesus Christ, and the history of his life and the written testimonies of him in the Gospels. And when I genuinely fully learn and seek the truth and Jesus, I was given so much purpose, and I was actually able to break through lust. And a practical tip that I was able to use was every time I would get a sexual thought, I'd cut it off at the root. I led to prayers, specifically the Our Father, the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to say. And I would go through the Our Father, any thought. And if it had gone, then I'd carry it along with my life. But if I still had that sexual thought, I would go into the rosary. I'd say the Hail Mary. I would say the Glory Be. And eventually it would go. And I built that habit. Some of you guys have built the habit of when you get a sexual thought to think of the next one, to give into it. You have to start. If you don't voluntarily remove yourself from the temptations of sin, you're going to involuntarily give away yourself to those temptations. So you have to consciously avoid and recognize what triggers those things and how to remove yourself from it. I started praying more. I started reading scripture daily. I've read through the whole New Testament, and I'm about a quarter of the way through the Old Testament. And eventually I'll have read the whole Bible. And as my dad said, the Bible is the best instructions before leaving earth. And where I'm going right now is I'm changing my life, because I've seen the struggles my mum's gone through, and it really buggers me. Seeing her down, seeing her sad, seeing her stressed, it does. And I haven't really expressed that truly to her because I'm still working on it, being able to show them that authentic person of me. There's no such thing as starting out with perfect genetics or starting out with the perfect situation. Everyone goes through struggles and tribulations. And that's why a big thing is my confidence is boosted, is acknowledging not that I'm better than others. That's not confidence, that's insecurity. Confidence is acknowledging that there's your faults, but others also have faults, and that you should never judge. Never judge that you're better than them. And courage, all courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And that's what I've been doing. I know I'm gonna grow this personal brand to be the best it can be, to help as much people that have gone through struggles that are maybe not the exact same as me, but through similar struggles, to know you're not alone and you can get through it. If you can start seeing the good in each other and good in yourself, to be optimistic, to consciously remove any negative thoughts, any lustful thoughts, you're going to change your life. And it's a tough choice to start changing your life, but that's what I'm doing right now. This is why I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep studying. I'm going to keep training hard. I'm going to keep working hard, because this is who I want to be. I want to carry on my dad's legacy of him, and I want to be able to be the best man I can. That's what I want to sum up. This has pretty much been a whole blur on my top of my head. Now, I may have missed a few things here and there, but I'm going to keep recording videos like these so I can become better at being more authentic. I might make another video, but this is my reference point. This is where I have been, where I am right now, and where I'm going to be. I will get there. Now, this might not be the perfect video in terms of flow, and I may have gone off, but just know that I made a start. And I know you can make a start too. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make a start. Make a change. Know who you want to be and who you could be. But yeah.
Anthony Thomas, if God takes me away to heaven, I want you to be a good boy. You must obey the commandments. You must love your mother, okay? Love mum, okay? And you have to do your best. Never give up. Always give your best. Say sorry when you make mistakes, okay?
Okay.
Be faithful in the little things. Those little things you do, okay?
Okay.
And you know what? Listen to mum and your big brothers and sisters. Forgive. You have to forgive, okay? And you have a good temper like me, so you have to learn to control that, okay? Control your tongue and your heart. Go to Mary, give your heart to Mary and Jesus and the saints. St. Thomas of Hamilton. Be tried. You want to be one thing, you ask God to help you be a saint, okay? And know what saints do? They make sacrifices, they carry crosses, they never give up, they love the Eucharist, they love Jesus in the Eucharist, okay? They love the sacraments. When they make a mistake, they go to confession. Pray, pray, pray. Let's say one prayer together. And Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Hail Mary.